It's strange how a single message can split your life into before and after. I was standing by the kitchen window, sunlight pooling on the old linoleum, when my phone buzzed. I expected a grocery reminder or a photo of my granddaughter's latest crayon masterpiece, not the words that would hollow out my chest. Mom, I think it's best if you don't come by the house anymore. Tanya and I need space. Please respect that. My hands trembled as I read it again, searching for a joke, a typo, any hint that this wasn't what it seemed. But the screen stayed cold and unyielding, each word sharp as glass. For a moment, the world shrank to the size of that tiny glowing rectangle. The hum of the fridge, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, even the ticking clock on the wall, all faded behind the roar of disbelief in my ears. How could a home built on bedtime stories and birthday cakes become a place I was no longer welcome? I want you to be with me in the video, because today is the day I want to clear my heart by telling everything to you. And I want you to comment your thoughts on my story. And subscribe to my channel, it will help me in this phase. So, I pressed my palm to the countertop, grounding myself in the cool, familiar surface. My heart thudded in my chest, a wild, frightened thing. I tried to remember the last time my son had hugged me, the last time his eyes had softened with the warmth I once took for granted. Was it at Christmas, when I brought his favorite pie and Tanya barely looked up from her phone? Or before that, when I babysat the kids so they could have a weekend away and he'd thanked me with a distracted smile? I replayed every recent memory, searching for clues, for a warning I'd missed. Had I said something wrong, overstepped, loved too much, or too visibly? The questions tumbled over each other, each one heavier than the last. I wanted to call him, to demand an explanation, to beg for a second chance. But pride and pain tangled in my throat, and I stood there, silent, as the afternoon light shifted and lengthened across the floor. The ache of betrayal settled in slowly, like a bruise blooming beneath the skin. I thought of the years I'd spent making that house a home, patching scraped knees, hanging family photos, teaching him how to tie his shoes and later his tie. I remembered the nights I stayed up waiting for him to come home safe, the mornings I packed his lunch with a note tucked inside. Was all of that invisible now? Did it count for nothing? I moved through the kitchen in a daze, my fingers brushing the backs of chairs, the chipped mug he'd given me for Mother's Day when he was 7. Each object felt suddenly foreign, as if I'd stumbled into someone else's life. The air was thick with things unsaid, the silence pressing in from every corner. I sat down at the table, the same spot where I'd once helped him with math homework and listened to his dreams of becoming an astronaut. Now, the only thing in front of me was that message, still glowing accusingly on my phone. I wondered if he felt relief as he sent it, if Tanya watched over his shoulder, nodding in approval. Did they talk about me as a problem to be solved, a burden to be managed? The thought stung, but I couldn't let it go. I scrolled back through our old texts, searching for warmth, for evidence that I still mattered. The words were there, updates about the kids, reminders about appointments, but the tenderness had faded, replaced by the flatness of obligation. My mind raced with memories, each one sharper for the knowledge that they might be all I had left. I remembered the day we moved into that house, boxes stacked in every room, laughter echoing off bare walls. I remember teaching him to ride a bike in the driveway, his triumphant grin when he finally let go of my hand. I remembered the quiet evenings after his father died, when we'd sit together on the porch, holding onto each other against the world's indifference. All of it felt impossibly distant now, as if it belonged to another family entirely. I closed my eyes and listened to my own breathing, slow and ragged. What do you do when your own child casts you out? How do you make sense of a love that's become unwelcome? I wanted to scream, to weep, to smash something just to feel real again. But instead, I sat in the gathering dusk, letting the weight of his words settle around me. The fear of being forgotten, of becoming invisible in the life you helped build, is a quiet terror, one that seeps into your bones. I wondered how many mothers had sat just like this, clutching their phones, waiting for an apology that would never come. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized nothing would ever be the same. The world outside my window kept turning, cars passing, birds calling, children laughing in distant yards, but inside, everything had stopped. I was left with questions I couldn't answer, a heart too full of ache to hold anything else, and the cold certainty that the door to my own home had been closed from the inside. The house was never just walls and windows to me. It was a living scrapbook, every corner holding a memory, every floorboard echoing with laughter or tears. I could walk through the front door and smell Sunday mornings, cinnamon rolls rising in the oven, coffee brewing strong and dark, the faintest trace of my late husband's aftershave lingering in the hallway. The living room still wore the dents from years of fort building, the faded patch in the carpet where my son spilled grape juice during his 5th birthday party. I'd run my hand along the banister, remembering the sticky fingerprints I used to wipe off, never knowing how much I'd miss them once they were gone. The kitchen was my sanctuary, a place where time seemed to slow. I could still see my son, hair sticking up in every direction, sleepily pouring cereal while I packed his lunch. The radio would play old country songs, and we'd dance around the linoleum, our slippers sliding, his laughter bright and boundless. On winter nights, we'd bake cookies and watch the snow gather in soft drifts outside, the house warm and golden, safe from the world. I kept every drawing he made, every crooked heart and superhero cape, tucked into a drawer by the stove. Even now, I could picture his small hands pressing dough into shapes, his proud smile when he presented me with a slightly burnt masterpiece. The refrigerator was a gallery of his childhood, report cards, team photos, a crayon sun with our names in shaky letters. Each magnet held a piece of our story. I remembered the holidays most vividly, when the house filled with voices and the air shimmered with anticipation. Thanksgiving meant the smell of roasting turkey, the clatter of pans, the sound of football games drifting in from the living room. My son would hover by the stove, sneaking bites of stuffing, his eyes shining with mischief. Christmas brought twinkling lights and the thump of boxes dragged down from the attic. We'd hang ornaments together, each one a memory. The clay snowman he made in kindergarten, the angel with a crooked halo that always made us laugh. After his father passed, the holidays grew quieter, but we clung to our rituals, lighting candles for the ones we missed and telling stories that kept them close. There were quieter moments, too, woven into the fabric of the house. Rainy afternoons spent reading on the couch, my son's head in my lap, the steady drum of drops against the window. Evenings on the porch swing, watching fireflies spark in the darkness, sharing secrets in hushed voices. I taught him how to tie his shoes on the bottom step, how to ride a bike in the driveway, how to mend a broken heart with patience and pie. Every lesson, every comfort, was given freely, never with the thought that one day I'd be asked to leave it all behind. But as I moved through the rooms now, the warmth of those memories collided with the chill of the present. The laughter had faded, replaced by the hum of appliances and the creak of settling wood. Family photos still lined the hallway, but I noticed how recent ones had fewer and fewer of me, first at the edges, then missing entirely. The dining table, once crowded with plates and stories, sat empty, a silent witness to what had been lost. I tried to hold on to the feeling of belonging, but it slipped through my fingers, replaced by a cold awareness that I was no longer part of the picture. I lingered in my son's old bedroom, The walls still painted the soft blue he'd chosen as a teenager. Trophies gathered dust on the shelf, relics of soccer games and spelling bees, each one a testament to years of cheering from the sidelines. I remember the nights I'd sit beside his bed, soothing nightmares with whispered promises that I'd always be there. I wondered now if those promises had meant anything, or if they'd faded like the posters curling at the corners. The closet still held a box of baby clothes, impossibly small, each one folded with hope for the future. I pressed a tiny onesie to my face, breathing in the ghost of a time when love was simple and unconditional. The bathroom mirror reflected a woman I barely recognized, eyes rimmed red, shoulders stooped beneath the weight of absence. I traced the lines on my face, each one a mark of laughter, worry, sleepless nights spent waiting for my son to come home. I remembered the first time he shaved, the mess he made, the pride in his voice when he showed me his smooth chin. Now, the counter was lined with unfamiliar bottles, Tanya's perfumes and lotions, their scents sharp and foreign. I felt like a guest in my own home, tiptoeing around memories that no longer belonged to me. Outside, the garden bloomed with stubborn resilience. Roses I'd planted with my husband years ago still burst into color each spring, their petals soft and fragrant. I used to watch my son chase butterflies between the rows, his laughter rising above the hum of bees. I tended those flowers through drought and storm, believing that care and attention could keep anything alive. But standing there now, I wondered if some things simply wither, no matter how much love you pour into them. I walked from room to room, letting each memory wash over me, a bittersweet tide that left me both full and empty. I wanted to believe that the house remembered too, that the walls held onto every whispered secret, every lullaby, every promise made in the dark. But the silence pressed in, heavy and unyielding, and I realized that memories, no matter how cherished, cannot keep you warm when the world has grown cold. I closed my eyes and listened, hoping for the echo of a child's laughter, the comfort of a husband's embrace, but all I heard was the distant rumble of thunder, the slow, steady drip of rain against the window pane. The past was alive in these walls, but the present had turned its back, leaving me to wander through rooms filled with everything I'd loved and nothing I could hold on to. It didn't happen all at once. If it had, maybe I would have seen it coming, braced myself, built some kind of armor. But the unraveling of a family is slow, so slow you almost don't notice until you're standing in the ruins, wondering how you got there. It began with the smallest of things, a missed phone call, a holiday invitation that arrived late, a birthday card signed only by Tanya, my name scrawled in a different hand. At first, I told myself it was nothing, that life gets busy, that young families have their own rhythms. I made excuses for them, for him, because that's what mothers do. We forgive the little things, never imagining they might be the start of something larger. There was a time when my son called me every Sunday just to check in, to share a joke, or ask for a recipe. I cherished those conversations, the easy back and forth, the way he'd laugh at my stories even when he'd heard them 100 times. But slowly, the calls grew less frequent, shorter, more distracted. Sometimes Tanya would answer, her voice polite but distant, always in a hurry to get off the line. She'd say, "We're just about to eat," or "Nathan's busy with the kids right now." I'd hear my grandchildren's voices in the background, shrieks of laughter, the thud of little feet, and I'd ache to be there, to scoop them up and feel their arms around my neck. But the phone would click off, leaving me with silence and the echo of what I was missing. Family traditions began to shift, quietly at first. Thanksgiving, once held in my dining room with the good china and the table stretched to its limits, moved to Tanya's mother's house. I was told about the change a day or two before, as if it were an afterthought. It's just easier for everyone, Tanya said, her smile tight, her eyes avoiding mine. I brought my famous sweet potato casserole anyway, hoping it would earn me a place at the table, but it sat untouched at the end of the buffet, crowded out by dishes I'd never seen before. I tried to join the conversation, to tell stories about Nathan's childhood, but Tanya would interrupt, steering the talk back to her family, her memories. I felt myself shrinking, my words dissolving in the air, my presence tolerated but not welcomed. Christmas was worse. The first year, I noticed the matching sweaters, red and white, festive and bright. Everyone wore one except me. I hadn't known there was a theme, hadn't been told. Nathan brushed it off when I asked, saying, "Oh, you're not really into that kind of thing, Mom." But I was. I always had been. I watched as they posed for photos. First the kids, then Tanya's family, then Nathan and Tanya with their children. By the time it was my turn, the kids were fidgeting, the camera battery was low, and the moment had passed. The pictures that ended up on social media were full of smiles, but I was always at the edge, slightly out of focus, easy to crop out. Birthdays, too, became quieter. Tanya took over the planning, hosting parties at her mother's house or at local parks. I was invited, but always as a guest, never as a co-host. Sometimes I'd arrive to find the cake already cut, the presents already opened. I'd bring carefully chosen gifts, wrapped with ribbons and love, but they'd be set aside, forgotten in the excitement. I told myself it was just the way things go, that children grow up and start their own traditions. But deep down, I felt the sting of being left behind, of watching my role shrink from center to spectator. It was the little things that hurt the most. The way Tanya corrected me in front of the kids, her voice sharp, her eyes rolling when I offered advice. The way Nathan stopped asking for my opinion, stopped confiding in me. Once, I tried to tell a story about our trip to the Grand Canyon, and Tanya cut me off, saying, "The kids have heard that one, Marilyn." I laughed it off, but inside I felt like a relic, a dusty book no one wanted to read anymore. I started to question myself, to wonder if I was too much, too needy, too eager to hold on to a past that no longer fit. I noticed how my calls went unanswered more often, how texts took days to get a reply. When I did hear from Nathan, the messages were brief, logistical, updates about school schedules, reminders about doctor's appointments, requests for babysitting. The warmth was gone, replaced by a cool efficiency that made me feel like an employee, not a mother. I tried to adapt, to be helpful but not intrusive, to offer support without expectation. But no matter how careful I was, I felt the distance growing, an invisible wall rising between us. The influence of Tanya became impossible to ignore. She organized everything, holidays, vacations, even Sunday dinners. She decided who was invited, where we met, what we ate. Nathan deferred to her in all things, his once strong opinions softened into agreement. I saw less and less of the boy I'd raised, the man who used to call me his best friend. In his place was someone careful, cautious, always glancing at Tanya before he spoke. I tried to tell myself that this was normal, that marriage changes people, that it was good for him to put his family first. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been replaced, not just as a mother, but as a person. I became invisible in my own life, a ghost haunting the edges of family gatherings. I watched as Tanya's mother took over the stories, the traditions, the seat at the head of the table. I listened as Nathan laughed at her jokes, praised her cooking, called her mom, in a tone that used to be reserved for me. I smiled through it all, determined not to make a scene, not to give anyone a reason to call me difficult or dramatic. But inside, I was unraveling, each small slight pulling at the threads of who I thought I was. Looking back, I wonder if there was a moment when I could have changed things, spoken up, demanded to be seen. But the truth is, I was afraid afraid of losing what little I had left, afraid that speaking my pain would only push them further away. So I stayed quiet, hoping that love would be enough, that patience would win them back. But love, it turns out, is not always louder than silence. Sometimes, it's the quiet that tells you everything you need to know. Grief is a strange companion. It settles in quietly at first, a dull ache in the chest, a heaviness behind the eyes. After that final message from my son, the house felt colder than ever, shadows stretching long across the floor as if even the light was retreating. I wandered from room to room, numb, unable to cry or scream, just existing in a haze of disbelief. My mind replayed his words over and over, each repetition carving a deeper wound. I tried to eat, to sleep, to distract myself with chores, but everything I touched reminded me of what I'd lost. The grief was joined by anger, sharp and hot, flaring up in flashes. How dare they cast me out of the home I built, the life I gave? I'd find myself gripping the edge of the sink, knuckles white, fighting the urge to throw something just to hear it shatter. But the anger never lasted long. It always gave way to shame. Shame is quieter, more insidious. It whispers that maybe I deserved this, that I was too much, too needy, too unwilling to let go. I thought of every moment I might have been overbearing, every time I'd offered advice or lingered too long at family gatherings. I imagined Tanya's complaints, Nathan's sighs of exasperation. I wondered if I'd become a burden, the kind of mother people talk about in hushed voices. The shame seeped into everything, making me small, making me doubt every act of love I'd ever given. I stopped calling, stopped texting, afraid of being a nuisance. I moved through the days in silence, shrinking from the world, from myself. But something shifted as the weeks passed. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a museum of someone else's happiness. Every photo, every trinket, every dent in the wall was a reminder of a life I was no longer living. I realized I was holding on to memories that brought more pain than comfort, clinging to a place that no longer welcomed me. The grief and shame began to give way to something else, a quiet, stubborn resolve. I started to ask myself hard questions. Was I willing to spend the rest of my days waiting for a knock on the door that might never come? Was I content to haunt these rooms like a ghost, hoping for scraps of affection? The answer, whispered at first but growing louder, was no. The decision to leave did not come in a single, dramatic moment. It was a slow gathering of strength, a reclamation of dignity. I began to see the house differently, not as the heart of my family, but as a shell, a place that had served its purpose. I thought about what it would mean to let go, to sell the home where I'd raised my son, loved my husband, celebrated and mourned and grown. The idea terrified me, but it also thrilled me in a way I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I imagined a future that belonged to me, not to the memories or the expectations of others. I spent long nights at the kitchen table, making lists, weighing pros and cons, picturing what it would feel like to hand over the keys. I wondered where I would go, what kind of life I could build for myself. The fear was real, of loneliness, of regret, of stepping into the unknown at my age. But beneath the fear was a flicker of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, I could find peace on my own terms. I realized that staying was not an act of love, but of self-abandonment. Leaving would not erase the past, but it might allow me to reclaim my future. The day I called the realtor, my hands shook, but my voice was steady. I walked through the house one last time, touching the walls, whispering thank you for every joy and sorrow they had witnessed. I packed away the keepsakes that mattered most, letting go of the rest. Each box sealed was a small act of liberation, a step toward something new. I did not know what awaited me beyond those doors, but I knew I could not stay where I was no longer seen. In choosing to leave, I chose myself, not out of bitterness, but out of a hard-won respect for the woman I had become. Packing up a life is nothing like packing for a weekend trip. It's not just about boxes and tape, but about sifting through the layers of who you were and who you hope to become. The first morning I started, the house was quiet, the kind of hush that settles after a storm. I stood in the living room, cardboard boxes stacked at my feet, and let my eyes wander over everything I'd once called mine. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and old books, a scent that seemed to cling to the walls no matter how many windows I opened. I picked up a faded cushion, its fabric worn thin from years of cradling tired bodies and whispered secrets. My hands remembered the shape of every dent, every seam, as if the past could be read by touch alone. In the hall closet, I found the shoeboxes where I'd tucked away my son's childhood, tiny shoes with scuffed toes, a lock of baby hair tied with blue ribbon, birthday cards with stick-figure drawings, and declarations of love. Each artifact was a doorway back to a moment I thought I'd never forget. I held the shoes in my palm, marveling at how something so small could once have filled my world. The ache of nostalgia was sharp, but there was comfort in it too, a reminder that love leaves traces even when people drift away. I sorted through the cards, reading the lopsided handwriting, the misspelled words, each one a testament to a time when I was the center of his universe. The kitchen drawers were a trove of memories, recipes scribbled on index cards, some smudged with flour and fingerprints, a chipped mug from our first family vacation, its handle glued on more than once, a jar of buttons collected from lost shirts and coats, each one a tiny relic of ordinary days. I ran my fingers over the smooth, cool surface of the mug, recalling the laughter that once filled this room, the warmth of shared meals and midnight snacks. I could almost hear the clatter of forks, the soft murmur of voices, the way my son's laughter used to ring out, bright and unguarded. I wrapped the mug carefully, unsure if I was protecting it from breaking or myself from the pain of letting go. Photographs were the hardest. I spread them out on the dining table, a mosaic of faces and places, smiles frozen in time. There was my husband, sunburned and grinning on a beach in Galveston, my son, missing his front teeth, holding up a wobbly birthday cake, the three of us, arms around each other, eyes shining with a happiness I didn't realize was fleeting. Some pictures made me smile, others brought tears. I lingered over the ones where I could see the shift, the way Nathan leaned away in later years, the way Tanya's smile grew tighter, the way my own eyes seemed to search for something just out of frame. I sorted the photos into piles. Keep, give away, let go. The hardest part was deciding which memories to carry and which to release. In the attic, dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight as I opened boxes untouched for decades. There were letters from my husband, written in a looping script, full of promises and longing. I read them aloud, the paper soft and thin, his words a balm, and a wound all at once. I found my wedding dress, yellowed with age, the lace delicate as breath. I pressed it to my cheek, inhaling the faint scent of cedar and old dreams. There were toys, board games, Christmas ornaments handmade by small, eager hands. Each object was a story, a chapter in the book of our family, and I read them all again as I packed. Letting go was not a single act, but a series of small decisions, each one a thread snipped from the tapestry of my life. Some things I kept, a handful of photos, a letter, a lock of hair, tokens to remind me that love, once given, never truly disappears. Other things I gave away, hoping they would find new homes, new stories. The rest I released, trusting that memories could live on without the weight of objects. As the rooms emptied, the house echoed with my footsteps, the sound strange and unfamiliar. I paused often, letting the memories wash over me, letting the tears come when they needed to. There was pain in the process, but also a strange kind of freedom, a lightness I hadn't felt in years. By the end, the house was bare, stripped of everything but sunlight and silence. I stood in the doorway, keys in my hand, and looked back one last time. The walls, once crowded with pictures and laughter, now stood quiet, bearing silent witness to a life well-lived and bravely released. I closed the door gently, knowing that I was not leaving love behind, but carrying it forward, lighter and stronger than before. There is a peculiar silence that follows the end of something monumental, a hush that is both terrifying and full of possibility. When I closed the door on my old house for the last time, I felt the weight of years slip from my shoulders, replaced by a fragile hope I hadn't known in ages. The proceeds from the sale sat quietly in my account, a symbol of both loss and freedom. For the first time in decades, I could ask myself, what do I want? The question was both daunting and exhilarating. I began by reaching out to old friends, women I'd lost touch with over the years, some through the slow drift of time, others through the busy tides of raising families. The first lunch was tentative, full of polite laughter and cautious stories, but soon our conversations deepened, our laughter growing louder, more genuine. We shared our scars, our disappointments, our small victories. In their company, I found pieces of myself I'd forgotten, my wit, my curiosity, my capacity for joy. Inspired by these reunions, I decided to create something I'd long wished for but never dared attempt, a support group for women like me, women who had given their lives to others and found themselves, in the end, standing alone. We met in sunlit rooms at the local library, the air scented with coffee and hope. Each week, new faces appeared, some drawn, some defiant, all carrying stories that echoed my own. We talked about our families, our heartbreaks, the loneliness that crept in during the quiet hours of the night. We cried together, but more often, we laughed, deep, unrestrained laughter that felt like a rebellion against the sorrow we'd carried for so long. In that circle of women, I found a sense of belonging more profound than anything I'd known in years. We became each other's witnesses, each other's cheerleaders, each other's chosen family. With time, my days grew brighter. I moved into a small cottage with wide windows and a garden that caught the morning sun. I filled the rooms with things that made me happy: books, bright quilts, fresh flowers. I hosted dinners for my new friends, the table crowded with food and stories, our voices weaving together in a tapestry of shared experience. We celebrated birthdays and holidays, inventing our own traditions. There was no need to perform, no fear of being forgotten or left out. Every guest brought a dish and a story, and every story was honored. I found joy in the simple rituals of daily life: planting tomatoes, learning to paint, walking through the park with a friend's arm linked in mine. The world, once so narrow and cold, opened up in unexpected ways. Sometimes, in the golden hush of evening, I'd sit on my porch and watch the light spill across the lawn, thinking of the life I'd left behind. There were moments of sadness. Of course, grief is not so easily banished, but they no longer defined me. Instead, I let them remind me of my strength, of the courage it took to begin again. I realized that family is not always bound by blood, but by the willingness to see and be seen, to love and be loved in return. My chosen family was small but fierce, a constellation of women who understood the value of presence, who knew that healing could be found in shared meals and honest conversation. I learned to celebrate myself, to honor my own needs and desires. I traveled to places I'd only dreamed of, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends. I stood on windswept beaches and mountain trails, feeling the pulse of possibility in my veins. I wrote letters to my younger self, forgiving her mistakes, thanking her for her hope. I discovered that happiness after loss is not only possible, but richer for the sorrow that came before. Each day felt like a gift, not because it was perfect, but because it was mine. In the laughter of my friends, in the warmth of my new home, I found the resolution I'd been searching for. I was not defined by what I'd lost, but by what I'd chosen to build. I was not invisible, not a burden, not a relic of someone else's story. I was a woman remade by grief and hope, surrounded by a family I had chosen and who had chosen me in return. And in that sunlit room, with laughter rising and hands joined around the table, I finally understood. This was the beginning I'd been waiting for all along. There are words I have carried for so long, words that pressed against my heart in the quiet hours when the house was empty and the ache of missing you felt too heavy to bear. I have written and rewritten this letter in my mind, searching for a way to explain the pain, the love, the bewilderment of being asked to step aside in the life I once built around you. I want you to know that I remember everything. The sound of your laughter echoing down the hall, the warmth of your small hand in mine, the way you once looked at me as if I was the safest place in the world. I remember the promises I made to always be there and the countless ways I tried to keep them, even when I was tired, even when I was lonely. I remember the joy of watching you grow, the pride I felt in every accomplishment, the silent prayers I whispered for your happiness. It hurt, Nathan, to be told I was no longer welcome, to feel myself erased from the story we wrote together. There were nights when I wondered what I had done wrong, what flaw or failing had made me unworthy of a seat at your table. I replayed every conversation, every moment I might have held on too tightly or spoken out of turn. I want you to know that my love was never meant to be a burden, that every act of care was given freely, never with the expectation of repayment. I am sorry if I loved too much, if I lingered too long in the spaces you needed to claim as your own. I am learning, even now, that letting go is also a form of love. I wish for you a life filled with kindness, with laughter, with the warmth of family and the comfort of belonging. I hope you find joy in the small moments and that you never doubt your own worth. I hope you remember the lessons I tried to teach you, not just how to tie your shoes or bake a pie, but how to be gentle with yourself and others. I hope you know that forgiveness is possible, even when words go unspoken and wounds run deep. I will always love you, even from a distance, even in silence. But this letter is not meant to be sent. It is not a plea for reconciliation or an invitation to reopen old wounds. It is a way for me to set down the weight I have carried, to honor the love that shaped us both, and to choose peace for myself. I am learning to let go of what cannot be changed, to find beauty in the life I am building now. I am surrounded by friends who see me, who value my presence, who remind me that family can be chosen and that joy can return, even after heartbreak. If you, watching this, have ever felt invisible in your own story, if you have ever poured your heart into a family that forgot how to hold you close, know that you are not alone. There is strength in surviving what was meant to break you, wisdom in choosing your own happiness, and hope in the possibility of new beginnings. We are not defined by the doors that close behind us, but by the courage it takes to open new ones. If you hear your own story and mine, I invite you to join this circle of resilience and grace. There is a place for you here, among those who have learned to let go and love again, not because we were never hurt, but because we chose to heal. If you love my story, make sure to click that subscribe button. It will help me a lot more than you think. Also like the video and comment your thoughts. I would love to hear from you.